have you. Um, we will get started. I'll just give everyone a couple more minutes. We're going to be recording this session for you. So if someone that you wanted to have attend today is not able to be here, we're going to go ahead and make sure you have that recording as well as a PDF of the presentation that we're doing today so that you have this information for future reference. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get started. It's 1:02. We'll get the party rocking today. So again, I want to welcome everybody this afternoon to our SPCSA grant application process training. This is an introduction to our education grants management and the work that we do here with the State Public Charter School Authority related to the fiscal side. So everything that you do in terms of applying for grants and getting those funds to be able to support the great work that you do in your schools, we're here to share with you today about our team, some of the information or key details about how this will work now that you will be transferring under our purview here. And so without further ado, let's get started. Right, so some meeting norms for today. Please keep yourself muted as much as possible. We do welcome you to unmute and share in the conversation as it makes sense to you, but we are going to ask you for the interim just to go ahead and remain muted. Again, like I mentioned, this presentation will be recorded and shared along with a PDF of the slides so that you have them for reference and future use. Cameras are optional. We like to keep it easy here. We love to see your faces, and we also know that that's not always possible. So you do you, and know that we won't be calling on you spontaneously, but we will look forward to you participating with us today. You can use that comment box for questions, suggestions, wondering, anything that comes to mind for you. And also, we're going to ask that you leverage the information in the moment. So if there is a question that comes up for you that you are wondering about, or that you're not so sure, I'm sure that question that you have will be somebody else's question as well. So please do ask that so we can have the conversation in the moment. Agenda. Again, we'll be going through some introductions. You'll be learning more about us as an organization, who the State Public Charter School Authority is, and how we support you on the fiscal side of management, of managing grants. We'll do a little overview of federal grants, and then we will dig into our grant management system and the application overview. We did use the feedback from the survey that we sent out to you, so thank you for those of you that were able to fill that out and give us the feedback. We really feel like we did our due diligence by creating a training that really is honed in on your biggest needs. For some of you, some of this will be repeat or reminder. For others of you, it'll be new information. So we appreciate your patience in digging in while we help our colleagues learn along the way. Learning objectives for today. So we want to make sure that we've organized the training in a way, again, that aligns to your needs as you articulated them. And then our intent is that you're going to be able to understand who we are as an organization. We want to make sure that you know how to access the resources that we have for you. So that includes the grant management system. That also includes our Canvas repository that has a plethora of information for you to be able to access and share with your staff and colleagues back at your school sites. We want to make sure that you understand the grant application cycle, how we work with you in that grant application cycle, and that you really are able to know and understand the key components of the grant application cycle. And another part where we heard from folks that is a little bit of a challenge is the idea of aligning your school performance plan and those goals and key areas to the grant and the grant narrative. So we're going to be digging in and having a little bit of fun with that too. So let's start with introductions. Like I mentioned before, my name is Kim Rombardo. I am the grant unit supervisor. Part of our grant unit team is our Director of Finance and Operations, Jennifer Bauer. We also have Christina Cote, who is our Education Programs Professional. And just as a note, Jen Bauer will be retiring soon, and we have her replacement here with us today. So Jennifer Villanueva, this is her first opportunity to be in a training with us. So we're super excited to have her here today. And just so you know, she will be transitioning and will be the new Jen, or maybe Jen 2.0, who knows? So welcome aboard, Jen. It's nice to have you here today.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We also, in our grant unit, have Christine Myers, who is our grant projects analyst 2, or our GPA 2, along with Paige Peck and Alyssa Troxel, who are both grants analysis for our group. And we'll talk a little bit about their roles and how they contribute to the work that we do here at the SPCSA. And the good part about this is I'm not the only person you're going to get to hear from today. So you'll hear all of our voices at one point or another moving through this work. And last but not least, to our introductions, I'm not going to go one by one, but I think it's also important for you to know our school support team, and this is our program side of the house. These folks are out in the field doing the really good work that supports how you implement your grants and how you support students in the field. So we definitely don't want to let that go without mentioning this fantastic group of folks that we have supporting you on the program side of the house. So let's talk a little bit about the SPCSA and grant management. So in this graphic, you'll see how we're organized. So you all are the new charter schools transferring from CCSD. You will be the subrecipients, or the schools that we support. You'll see the State Public Charter School Authority sits there in the middle. We are known as your pass-through, or act as an LEA for that funding, that grant funding that is directed by the Nevada Department of Education. So NDE still acts as our SEA, obviously, but now in lieu of the district, we are your new LEA and the pass-through unit that helps to support all the federal funding and the allocations that you get through the grants and titles. So just as I mentioned, Nevada Department of Education is that pass-through entity, or we are the pass-through entity to NDE for most of your grants. There will be some opportunities, maybe, it's still unclear. There's been a lot of shift in most of what we do now here at the SPCSA. We are the pass-through for most grants, but there could be some, depending on how funding works, that you would go directly to NDE, and we would guide you in any opportunity where that would be the difference. All right, so let's talk about the types of grants that the SPCSA supports. So you'll see there are 3 different buckets that the grant funding falls into, and I'm not going to go real in depth with this. Christina will take us through more about some of this funding. But in a high-level overview, we have the entitlement formula grants. Those fall into our title grants. These are the allocated grants based on student population, as well as our IDEA grants. You'll also notice that we have discretionary and competitive grants in there, like our Nevada Ready Pre-K opportunities, or McKinney-Vento, which is more of the discretionary funding. And then there's some other special grants that might come into play. So these could fall under the category of like Project Aware or mental health, school-based mental health programs, relief or emergency funds, the same that we saw with our ESSER funding and how that rolled out. And there could be others that are determined by this legislative session, depending on priorities. We might even put our Read by Grade 3 funds into that other special category grants, although Read by Grade 3 has now been bucketed in the per pupil funding formula, but it once was that type of special grant or competitive grant. Let's talk a little bit about grant phases and the associated key components to those. So in a grant phase, there will be the pre-award phase, and we're really going to dig in with you on this pre-award idea of what it takes to get this information out so that you can get your allocation and funding. This pre-award phase includes completing and submitting that grant application. And one of the things we want to do is we really want to ensure that your grant is aligned to that school performance plan that you've created, as well as using your needs assessment to pull the data so that you're creating a grant application that really aligns to your unique population at your school. This grant application will not only include a narrative, but it'll also include the budgets and budget line items. And that's where our teams can really lean in alongside you to help you better understand, how do I take my program, or how do I take my goals, align it to my program, and then align it to my budget details. Again, we'll look at some of that in a little bit. And then comes the award phase, where the subawards are granted and executed. It's provided to us, and then we can allocate that money to you accordingly. The post-award phase is anything where we're monitoring, reporting, making sure that the funds are spent the way that we have indicated in that grant application. And this post-award phase also includes opportunities for amendments, because as we know, the landscape of things change quite frequently in education, and we want to make sure that we're supporting you in the best way possible to make sure that you are getting, being able to use those funds as it makes sense throughout the year. All right, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton to Christina, who's going to take you through some information around federal grants. Christina?
Thank you, Kim. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Christina Cote, and I'm an education programs professional on the grant unit, and I'm delighted to spend this afternoon with you. Over the next few slides, or this next section, I'm going to provide some foundational information around federal grants, especially entitlement grants. The SPCSA has a course in our grants administration Canvas portal repository that provides this information in more detail than what I'm going to present with you, but you can take a look at that later, and we'll share those key Canvas repository links later in the presentation. They're also available in our weekly newsletters. Next slide, please. Thank you. So on this slide, you can see entitlement grants are also commonly known as formula or proportionate share grants. The funds that are distributed to recipients based on a formula established by law. So as a threshold criterion, eligibility for entitlement grants is based on the type of recipient, but it also may involve other criteria such as school or student populations, poverty level, or a number of students in the special population, such as students experiencing homelessness or those with disabilities. Most of our federal program grants that our charter schools receive through pass-through fall under the entitlement grant programs. On this slide, we have listed 5 key entitlement or formula-based grants that your school may have be eligible to receive, and you probably have seen those hopefully in the GMS, our grants management system. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, but you can kind of see simplified here. We start with Title I Part A, and Title I Part A is the purpose of it is really to support students of poverty or low-income students. Title IIA is actually the only federal grant that's specifically dedicated to improve teacher, administrator, and educator quality and effectiveness. Then we have Title III English language learners, which is funding to provide language instruction for English learning, ELs, and immigrant students. Title IVA is funding actually has a lot of flexibility, and it's funding to schools that usually receive Title I funds, and it's to support one or more additional areas of focus, such as it could be like STEAM education, the arts and such, technology, or safety, health and safety. So those are a nice grant to get as well for flexibility. And then we also have the IDEA, Individuals with Disability Education Act for special education. That funding is to provide schools, to assist schools to supplement and to increase the level of special education related services provided to eligible students with disabilities ages 3 through 21 who are enrolled in special education programs. So just so you're clear, IDEA is broken in two parts. We have Big B, which is the basic special education funding, and then we have also IDEA Little B, Section 619, which is targeted towards special education services for preschool children ages 3, 4, and 5. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here's a broad view of the program requirements and mandated activities for federal title and IDEA special education grants. So they must be based on a data-driven comprehensive needs assessment, which is also known as a CNA, which informs the goals and activities included in the school's performance plan. And for IDEA, it should be based off of the education's local special education local plan in alignment with the SPP annual performance report, also known as APR indicators. You can see that there are some links that are here that will provide some additional resources, and also the SPP annual APR indicators that goes directly to the NDE's website, and you'll get a copy of that later when you get the PDF if you want to explore further. The comprehensive needs assessment is conducted to help determine the root causes that are addressed in your school performance plan. It analyzes the various data such as demographic data, proficiency level data, academic content achievement, and so forth. And I know Brittany had provided an SPP training and kind of talked a little bit about that a couple weeks ago, I believe. Stakeholder feedback must be solicited to inform school needs and develop these plans. And also, only allowable uses of funds are allowed by the grant program that are approved. Grant application budget resources must be in alignment to the purpose, goals, and priorities of the program. Additionally, the Every Student Succeeds Act requires title grant subrecipients to implement evidence-based strategies, programs, and interventions with a proven record to improve student academic achievement, all focused on high-quality standards backed by evidence. And then lastly, grant allocations must only be used to supplement, not supplant. Next slide, please. Thank you. So drilling down a little bit further, the first requirement is the same for all federal title grants. It must be based on the comprehensive needs assessment and the data-driven plan. Your schools were invited to the SPP training earlier this month, facilitated by Brittany and the SST team. Here's some key links that you can see. The Nevada Department of Education provides the Plan for Learning link. That first link is a portal which where the SPP plans are created and submitted. The Plan for Learning portal also includes streamlined data-driven resources and guidance around the process steps needed to complete and resource the school performance plan. The SPCSA School and Support Team also has further training and resources available at this Continuous Improvement Kansas repository. You can see some screenshots of different documents that are resources that are there, like for how to conduct a root data drive, root cause analysis, how to write a SMARTY goal, and so forth. So those are some additional resources that hopefully you've already been looking into, but if not, you can take a look at those when you get this presentation a little bit later. Next slide, please. So the second required, all federal grant applications go through an allowability analysis. These standards are reviewed by the SPCSA and the Nevada Department of Education staff when determining application approval statuses. So all federal subaward funds your school receives must follow these regulations. They must be allowable, reasonable. Allowable use of funds refers to the item of the costs that they are funded, and with federal grant dollars, as long as the cost fits in the framework of a reasonable stewardship of public funds. This means determining if expenditures are allocable, reasonable, and necessary. Allocable, again, is making sure that it's in accordance with the relative benefits received by the projects. Reasonable, a cost is reasonable if it's in nature and the amount, if it does not exceed that which are accrued by a prudent person. So the $5,000 laptop maybe not be something that as a taxpayer would someone would think would be reasonable. a reasonable cost. And then necessary, a cost is necessary if it meets an important program objective. It must address an existing need. And with that need, it needs to be aligned to the approved SPP budget, which includes grant-specific deliverables and grant-specific timelines. So that would be included in kind of your resources of your SPP and those SMARTY goals. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at the supplement not supplant rule. I briefly shared a little bit of this during the SPP training. Remember, supplement not supplant, it refers to how that federal funds must be additive. They must be spent in addition, and they do not replace services that schools or the intended beneficiary would otherwise receive in the absence of other federal or state funds. Supplanting is presumed if any of these bullets on the bottom of the slide are true. So they cannot, supplanting is presumed if they are required under other federal, state, or local laws. If the school provided the same services, interventions, or strategies with non-federal funds in the prior year, or if the school would have otherwise provided them without federal funds. So the SPCSA and the Nevada Department of Education assign education programs professionals who review your charter school's budget details and plan. They'll plan and presume that one of these is true until your description shows otherwise. A lot of key words that we encourage our schools to use is to say supplement before the activity resource or whatever it might be, supplemental parapros, for example, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. That just kind of helps provide that so that question, that red flag does not be is not out there during a review. Another related point, naming the beneficiary. Please be clear about who's benefiting. If rather than referring to a school administrator as a superintendent, please refer to them as a supplemental building administrator. Otherwise, they may raise red flags, further questions, and brings closer scrutiny. So that's not, the executive level is not allowable under the Code of Federal Regulations. Lastly, on that last little line, under maintenance of effort provision, a state is required as a condition of eligibility of federal funding to maintain its financial contribution to a program if it's not less than the amount of its contribution for some time, prior time period. So maintenance effort is a requirement for SPCSA schools that are receiving Title I and IDEA funds. So for example, in the case of IDEA, charter schools must budget and spend at least the same amount of local or state and local funds for the education of children with disabilities on a year-to-year basis, meaning maintenance of effort is very important. All right, next slide, please. So if your school is eligible for one or more of those federal grants, you're going to see it in the SPCSA's grants management system, also known as the GMS. I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton over to one of our amazing grants and projects analysts, Paige Peck, who will provide a short live walkthrough of our system.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Christina. Can everyone see my screen? I'm just going to assume so. If you cannot, please let me know. We're just going to go ahead and do a really quick dive into our GMS portal. I have logged in already. So what you're seeing on my screen now is the dashboard. And today we're actually going to focus our attention onto the grants tab. So over here on the left-hand side, I'm going to click on the grants tab. And if you are an EMO or a CMO who may be tied to multiple schools, you have the ability to see multiple schools in the select a school option up here at the top. If you are not and you are associated with one school, you should just see your one school. But before seeing any of your applications on this tab, you will need to select your school. So for today's purposes, we're actually going to use our test account so that we can see what it looks like in here. Perfect. Okay. Once we have selected our school here, we have a couple of different application statuses up here at the top. The first is the open status. This status requires action on your part. This means that the application is open, it has not yet been submitted to the SPCSA, and it needs to be completed. So both the written components and the budget details will need completed, and we will go over what that looks like in just a second. The next status you see here is the subaward active status. This is for programs or applications that you have submitted to the SPCSA. We have reviewed and accepted your application and submitted it to NDE. NDE has also reviewed and accepted your application. Once NDE accepts the application, we send through DocuSign to your school administrator and board president a subaward. Once the subaward has been signed by both of those individuals, you will see your grant application show under this status. This status means that the application is active and you are able to submit reimbursement requests and spend money against this program or this application. The next status is revision required. So you will see this status once you have submitted your application to us. If there are written component or budget detail revisions that are required, we will send the application back to you and you will be able to access it here. When you get into the written component and budget detail tab, which I will show you very shortly, you will see your revision comments highlighted in red, so you can see our notes and what needs to be corrected for that application. The pending subaward status is for applications that have been approved by NDE. We at the SPCSA have sent through DocuSign to your school administrator and board president a subaward, and it just hasn't been signed yet. If we're waiting on any of those signatures, this is what status you will see that application under. Please note, you will not be able to submit any reimbursement requests against applications that are in this status. And then lastly, funds exhausted. This is pretty self-explanatory. This is for, you'll see your applications that you have completely spent your allocations. So we're going to go to the open tab, and I'm going to open one of our test grants by clicking this open button here on the left. And there are 3 tabs within the application that we will want to focus on today. The first is the general tab. You will see your school name here, and you are also able to select your contacts, both your primary, secondary, and alternate contacts for this specific application. This will ensure that we are contacting the right people if we have any questions, or the right people are getting notified if the application gets sent back for revision. And you'll also see there will be a name listed here for the assigned GPA to that application. Should you have any questions, you'll know who to reach out to. All right, down here at the bottom, we have the general application information, including the grant period of performance down here, total allocation, fiscal year, submission due date, and just some helpful information that's here for your reference. Okay, moving on to the written components tab. Based off of the program, the written components, like the actual content of the written components and the number of written components will vary by program. So please make sure to read through the written components and answer all of the questions completely before submitting your application. You are able to start working in these fields and save them as you go, and you can move on to the budget details without having these done. So before submitting your application, it's always good to do a double check that the written components are answered and that your answers are clear and concise. To move on to the next tab, you can click down here to the next button, or you can navigate up here using just the budget details tab. Okay, for this tab, we're going to go over this a little bit more in depth later in the training, but each of these fields with a red star will need to be completed. So when you are building your budget, each budget detail will need to have this information. This includes your object code description, function code description, budget tag, if your program has budget tags, and an ESSA evidence level if it's applicable to that program. You'll also enter a quantity and salary amount here to get to your total. This not to exceed is the total that is automatically calculated by our grant management system, which is why it's grayed out. The text box down here is for your budget detail narrative. We're going to go over the components of what that needs to have later in the training, but this is where you're going to put it, and you are able to text or type text in this box as needed. As you build your budget details, once you have added it, you will see a list of them appear down here at the bottom, and your totals will adjust accordingly. So your total will go up and your remaining amount will decrease. Once your remaining amount is 0, you will be able to submit your application. Down here, you'll enter when you're ready to submit. You've checked your written components, your budget details, everything looks good, and you're ready to submit. You'll enter your name, your title, the date, and you'll hit this submit application box or button. Please note there is a reimbursement request tab up here, but we're not going to focus on that for applications because until it's approved, there won't be any reimbursement requests tied to this specific application. I know Christina had mentioned our Canvas portal, and I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. We do have a GMS Basics module with demonstrations and slides for our entire GMS portal. So please refer to that if you would like to dive deeper and reach out to us. We're here for you. All the GPAs can help. So we are here and happy to help. I'm going to turn it back over to Christina.
Thank you, Paige. That was very, very succinctly demoed. Appreciate that. And there's a lot to work on. As Paige mentioned, we do have a very thorough GMS course with all these different modules, all the different buttons and such based on that grant cycle. Kim, if you wouldn't mind going back to the presentation.
Sure, just give me a minute to pop it up.
Absolutely. All right, and next slide, please. There you go. Okay, perfect. So we're going to talk about how, so let's just assume we've already talked a little bit about the school performance plan. That's the foundation, right? And then the resources that are braided within that plan for all the different strategies and interventions and activities you've identified. Let's assume that those have been identified. So now what we want to do is, how do we take those SPP resources and transfer the information into the grants management system? So this is where we're going to start. So this slide demonstrates the key processes and tasks schools need to complete prior to submitting a grant application for approval. So the first step on the left is completing the SPP in the Plan for Learning portal, which would include identifying annual performance goals, determining the improvement strategies to support those goals, identify the resources and funding needs to support the improvement strategies, and then ensure the federal funding or state funding or whatever you have, those resources are supplemental, especially for the federal funding, the SNS rule, and in alignment to the purpose and the beneficiary of the grant. So step 2 is that right bucket, and that is transfer the federal funding resource needs from your SPP to the grant application budget details of the grants management system, or the GMS. So within that, the budget details, that the tab 3 that Paige had demonstrated, you're going to determine the accounting information that is needed, the numeric information, the written information, and you're going to ensure that budget detail narrative follows an SPCSA formal. Let's look at an example. Next slide, please. All right. So let's take this is an example, annual performance objective 1. So after conducting the comprehensive needs assessment with your key stakeholders, the SPCSA charter school had identified this following annual performance objective. Charter school will continue to increase the percentage of all students who are deemed to be probably proficient on iReady, with a focus on all students meeting stretch growth. And then they have iReady proficiency will increase. So they have some data in here in reading from 70% in spring 2024 to 79% in spring 2025. And then they have a math goal that's similarly built with percentages and data measurements measured by the spring iReady diagnostic data. So the charter school wrote a note in their SPP that we're writing this plan prior to spring 2025 data, which we'll assume will move us in the right direction towards increased proficiency in 2026, and that's just because of timing. Next slide, please. Okay, so after that has been conducted, then once the annual performance objective has been determined, the school then will identify strategies in alignment to that objective. So here's an example of this that particular SPCSA charter school's improvement strategy 1. Now remember, they could have multiple strategies that are in alignment to that performance objective, right? But here's one. So improvement strategy 1, you can see that in order to increase the number of students who meet proficiency according to iReady, SBAC's likely proficiency tool, students in every grade level will be required to complete and pass a designated number of iReady lessons each week in both math and ELA, which will be reflected in weekly homework. So they've got kind of these additional kind of details of this annual, this particular improvement strategy, again, in an alignment. So there's different, a little bit more further kind of breakdown of that. A key call out for the ESEA federal title funding, that it must be backed by evidence. So this school has completed research to determine that the evidence-based level for this iReady that they're going to be looking for is tier 3, which is promising. And the school cited the applicable study to support the improvement strategy, which was, I believe it was like a 2022 study or something. And so this is tier 3 promising. Now, all this would be identified in the school performance plan and the plan for learning piece. So just that's, again, taking it from the plan. The school, again, has multiple funding streams available to which they are eligible. So the next step is to determine how to most effectively braid the different funding that they have. So let's continue with this process using this example. Next slide, please. All right. So I like analogies. And so with braiding funds, I kind of feel like it's like building a cake. So in this case, I'm going to make the analogy of building a funding cake. So remember that federal education funds can't be replaced. They can't replace services or that the school has intended, or that the beneficiary would already otherwise would receive in the absence of obtaining that federal grant award, right? So if you can, again, that's a supplement, not supplant rule. So if you look at the bottom of the cake, you're going to want to start with that kind of the bottom general funds, and then you layer it with the state funds, and then you put your federal funds on top of that, and those are additive. So here's this for that one particular strategy. These were all the different on the right. You can see these are all the different types of resources that this particular school had identified to help with that strategy. So for example, in our school example, you can see that for general funds at the bottom, they had identified to use novels anchor text for each student, right? Because that's something that you would have to get, that wouldn't be supplemental with funds. That's like, you need to provide the curriculum and such. That's what they're going to use for their general funds. Then the state funds, nothing was identified for this particular strategy in the SPP. So they went up to the next piece, which is federal funds. And you can see that federal funds include Title I-A, Title II-A, Title IV-A to pay for supplemental instructional assistance or parapros. And then Title II-A was identified to allow professional development time for those teachers to collaborate with some sort of Miami-based charter schools in the same network to try to learn. So let's drill down on the kind of that middle-ish tier that's outlined in green, the federal Title I Part A, the parapros. Let's look down at the next one. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is what they had written. Teachers will providing the learning and supplemental instructional assistance, paraprofessionals, interventionists will be to support students, helping to keep everyone following along and engaged and working in small learning groups. So one thing I want to call out here is you see supplemental instructional. Again, it's additive, a key word to use. If it's additive, you want to put there, and that won't have that supplement on supplant rule. They won't break that. This process is going to be completed in the SPCSA's grants management system, because we want to take this kind of this strategy, this resource strategy, and we want to translate it into our GMS, which is at the bottom. You see a little screenshot. So let's take a look at this Title I improvement strategy resource again, and we're going to see how that gets translated into a budget detail. Next slide, please. So if you recall from Paige's great little GMS walkthrough, tab 3 is that budget details tab of the GMS. And there are 3 basic elements that comprise the budget detail in the GMS. And she kind of mentioned this. So I'm going to give it some language to it. So the first one is the accounting information. And that would be like the object code, the function code, the budget, and the object code and function code are aligned to our charter school, of our chart of accounts, the state chart of accounts. a budget tag if needed. Some grants applications will require a budget tag. And then there's a numeric information as well, which would be like your quantity, your salary, and the total. And then the bottom is that written information, which is that also called a budget narrative formula. The most important characteristic of any budget component, whether it's the budget details or the narrative, is that the calculations themselves must be correct. If the product or the multiplication of the unit cost and the quantity of units isn't the same value as what's included like in the total amount, and then that's also aligned to that written information, it will be returned for correction and to change those calculations. So likewise, again, that word problem, that written information must include the same values that are found in the budget detail, or the calculation reference in the narrative itself is not correct, it won't be approved. So a quick side note, there's recorded demonstration. There's a recorded demonstration available in the GMS. You can see right below that budget details header on the screenshot, there's like a little blue link. You can actually see another demonstration of how to use these different fields, which is nice. So we have it in Canvas, we also have it within the system as well. Thank you, Krim. Next slide, please. So let's first review the accounting information, which is that object code, function code, budget tag, if required, in relation to the strategy. So the object code and function code descriptions, they actually, I'm going to put some links here in the chat so you can take a look. We have some resources in Canvas. Let me pull this up really quick, and I'm going to type in some resources in the chat here that will help you determine which object code to choose from the dropdown, which function code, which budget detail, tag description that you might need to use, and then we talked about the evidence-based levels, which is in the SST Teams Canvas repository. So how would you complete these fields? What is the school resource, looking at the strategy as outlined in green, what are they wanting to fund here? So he says teachers will be providing the learning and supplemental instructional assistance, or paraprofessionals, interventionists will be to support students and such. So they're trying to, in this particular example, fund people, right? It's a instructional assistant. So we're talking about salaries here. So for the object code, and if you look at that one of those links that I provided, the first link that I provided in the chat is actually our SPCSA grants object code, function code summary that we put. And it's a simplified version of the second link, which is the Nevada Department of Education's guidance document. You can choose whichever one works best for you, but you will see that it shows all the different object codes and function codes start on page 14 of SPCSA's doc. So that kind of provide. So as far as the object code, since it's a salary, it's a person, you're going to actually you're going to do salary, especially since it's a full-time employee here. The function code in this example is actually, they're providing instruction, right? So instruction to students, or supporting students there. So you would use the drop-down for instruction, again, using one of those resources. And then we'll talk about the budget description and the ESSA level again on the next slide. Next slide, please. So here's an example of what we talked about, right? So using that object code description, I selected salaries, the function code description, and this is not comprehensive. You can't see all the options, but we picked instruction. So that's the function code. The budget tag description for this particular grant, Title I, is aligned to this Nevada's Department of Education's state goals. So, and they may change because they change sometimes based on the superintendent turnover. So currently there are 6 goals here. Choose the goal, the budget tag. Don't overthink it. Just choose the one that's most aligned to the resource you're requesting. So in this case, the school chose all students experience continued academic achievement, because that's the ultimate goal for both Title I-A as well as resourcing these paraprofessionals, interventionists. And then the ESSA evidence level was promising, which was level 3. So they selected level 3 for the ESSA evidence level, which is required for those ESEA grants. Next slide, please. All right. I'm now going to hand the baton over to our amazing grants and projects analyst, Alyssa, who's going to demonstrate how to determine the last two budget detail components that I had referenced, the numeric information and the written information. Alyssa?
Thank you, Christina. Yes, my name is Alyssa Troxel. I'm also one of the grants and projects analysts at the SPCSA, and we're going to use our example to go over all of our numeric information for this budget detail. Kim, if you want to go to the next slide, we can kind of break it down and see in the budget details tab, Christina has gone over the accounting information. I'm going to go over the numeric information that's pulled out if you follow the arrow in purple. This is just kind of the quantitative value for your budget detail line. So for quantity, you're going to ask yourself, using this data for this example, how many instructional assistants are we paying with this federal grant? For this example, it's going to be 1 full-time employee, so the quantity is 1. For the salary, rental, and unit cost, it's pretty self-explanatory here. You're going to ask yourself, what is the salary amount for each of the assistants or paraprofessionals that you're funding with this grant? You're going to provide the annual salary in the salary, rental, or unit cost. And again, as Paige had mentioned in her navigation, the total not to exceed is calculated for you by the system. So that will automatically populate in the gray area. So Kim, if you want to hit the next slide. This is our answer here. So the information that's right next to that big green check mark, those are the fields, that's the data that you're going to provide in the fields for the numeric information. And then if you want to go to the next slide, Kim, we'll go on to the written information of the narrative description. This is probably the trickiest part of a budget detail. This is the field where you're going to clearly demonstrate the allowability for the grant and also kind of provide some alignment from your school performance plan. The narrative should also help enhance the budget detail by providing context for that accounting and numerical information that you've provided above, and just provide some general transparency for the use of funds that you're using. So Kim, if you go to the next slide, please. We've created this budget narrative formula to help schools kind of get an outline of what we're looking for, what we're reviewing, and also what NDE is reviewing for budget narratives to kind of help you use your information from your school performance plan and kind of decide what your needs are to kind of translate them into that budget narrative formula. So the first field, number 1, is your school or campus name. This identifies the name of the school or campus that's receiving the funds. Number 2 is the type and purpose. This is the what and the why. The type is going to demonstrate allowability and alignment to the program plan. And it describes what the supplemental request is. And it typically correlates with the object code. So like a salary or, benefits, that sort of thing. And then the why is why the expenditure is necessary or the reason for the request, which again kind of correlates to the function code. And then you also want to have specific services or interventions requested, and these should be backed by evidence for a federal grant that requires that. Number 3 is the beneficiary. This is the who. This is where you want to reference to the beneficiary of the grant or who will be benefiting from that service or activity or position or intervention. Some examples would be instruction to students, support to teachers, safety for school operations, that sort of thing. Number 4 is for benefit category. This is only applicable for our object code 200, which is for fringe benefits. This is where you're going to list the specific benefits that are provided as part of your kind of fringe benefits package for whatever applicable staff you'll be using the funds for. So examples would be PERS, workers' comp, group insurance, medical, dental, that sort of thing. And number 5 is the cost calculation. This is going to be like kind of your written numeric information. It's going to list the specific, positions or services or items, give the count or the quantity of each of those positions or items, provide a reasonable cost for each of those items, and then conclude with a total for that budget line item. And we want to note that this cost calculation should match the information in the numeric information. And then you can round for costs to the nearest dollar or percentage, but just make sure you note that when you're doing any kind of rounding, just say like rounded to the nearest dollar. So if you click to the next slide, Kim, we'll kind of use our example for our Title II layer cake. So teachers are going to provide the learning and supplemental instruction assistance to support students, helping to keep everyone following along and engaged or working in small groups. So I'm going to jump down to, we kind of color coded the key. I'm going to jump down to the cost calculation. The cost calculation is going to mirror what you put in the numeric information. So it's going to be, 1 full-time employee times the salary equals the total for that budget line item. I do want to note that sometimes these numbers won't particularly line up if you're using, say, like a portion of funding. If you go back to that layered cake that Christina was, kind of made me hungry thinking about, sometimes you're braiding funds, right? And so maybe you're spending, you're using federal funds for a salary, but you're using a portion for one federal grant and maybe finishing that portion with another federal grant. You want to note that in the cost calculation, you're going to provide that detail that we need, but the numeric information is going to be what you're actually spending your money on. So for example, let's say you have a paraprofessional that you're going to be spending funds of their base salary, which is $40,000. And for Title I, you're going to spend a portion of that fund. You're going to spend $20,000. So for the numeric information, you're going to put 1 for quantity. The salary or unit, you're going to put the portion that you're spending just Title I dollars for, the $20,000. So the total budget line would be $20,000. But then when you go down to your cost calculation, you're going to specify we're using a portion of Title I funds at this $20,000 of the base salary for this position, which is $40,000, to show that we're using a total of Title I dollars at $20,000. And then the remaining amount will be used through other sources. If you go to the next slide, we'll finish up with the rest of the key. Using the information that we had before, we're going to, in the next slide, kind of really show and use all the color coding, the school name, the type and purpose, the beneficiary, and then see that cost calculation. So Kim, if you want to go to the next slide, I think this kind of really helps kind of contextualize everything. So your school name, and you'll just provide your school name. And using all this evidence-based, work that we've done with the program plan, we've outlined what our goals are, what our needs are. We've kind of devised this succinct description of what we're actually using the funds for, and we're tying those funds to those like allowable costs and to the school performance plan. So for the school name, it's your school name. The type and purpose are in blue. This is to pay for supplemental paraprofessionals to support EL and math interventions during Title I or Tier 1 and Tier 2 instruction. So the salary is the what. The salary for supplemental paraprofessionals is the what. The why is to support the EL and math interventionist, And during the tier 1 and tier 2 instruction is the kind of specific services or interventions that are backed by evidence for Title I. In purple, we have the beneficiary. These supplemental interventionists are supporting students in both EL and math. And again, it's for all students too, as they've been measured by the SBAC. And then as we go back to kind of the type and purpose, this is with intense interventions to support all increased academic achievement. That's kind of linking back to the function code of instruction. So you see kind of how a lot of this kind of aligns, right? Like the type and the purpose kind of align back and provide a little bit of context for the accounting information of the object code and the function code. It provides a succinct description. It gives you exactly who's benefiting from the funds and why they're being used. And then when we go down to the cost calculation, we have one full-time interventionist, which goes back to the numeric information at $24,953 and 78 cents per year for a total of $24,953 and 78 cents per year. And then they just kind of, add a little supplemental information that all costs are estimated and accounts and amounts may vary, just to kind of, hedge your bets. So using all this kind of specific information, I'm going to turn it back over to Christina so we can get some interaction from the group and start thinking about how we can implement this at your own school with your own data and your own information.
Thanks, Alyssa. Okay, so now that it's time for you to kind of try and apply the written component training we just reviewed, and Alyssa did a great job. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. All right, so here on this slide, it's another, we've provided another example school improvement strategy that came from their SPP. So what we're going to ask you to do is using the key, as you see at the bottom of this slide as your reference, I'm going to ask schools on this call to review the example strategy on the slide and to identify the parts of the written components. So I'm going to break them down like one at a time. And what I'd like you to do is just to please type your answer. You can summarize your answer in the chat box of the Teams thing, and then we'll review all the answers together on the next slide. It's kind of just testing to see if you can kind of break this down and apply this, and then eventually you'll be able to do it with your own strategies and resources that you have in your SPP. All right, so the first component is school name. So I want you to read this. I'm not going to read it for you. Read this example really quietly, and when you see the name of the school, please type that in the chat.
That was a lob, right? That's just the easy one.
That's the easy one.
We're warming them up, right,
That's right. That's right. I'll just give you a couple seconds to do that. Okay. All right, so school name was the green, and it looks like everyone's doing a great job. They got SPCSA or SPCSA school, charter school, that all works. Okay, the next is the type and purpose. So this time I want you to look back at it, and I want you to locate what you believe is the supplemental resource request is and why the expenditure is needed to support the strategy. So go ahead and type, kind of summarize your answers in the chat. It doesn't have to be verbatim at this point because we'll kind of show that, but just like what you kind of see, what that might look like. So what's the type of, what's the request, and what's the purpose of the request? What are they asking for and why? And this one's a little bit meatier, I think.
There's a lot, but we'll know if they just give us the gist, right?
Yeah. Yep. You don't have to make it. You don't have to go into too much detail. Like, what are they asking for here? They're talking about a strategy, right?
They're asking for a lot.
Yeah. What are they looking for here? I'll give you a clue. Look towards the end. It might give you a little bit more. Yeah, there you go, Jerry. And that can, the information, sometimes there's a lot of contextual information in your strategy, but really what you're actually looking for may be at the top, could be in the middle, or could be at the bottom. Yeah. Okay. Now we're kind of seeing it. Yeah. Okay. All right. And then the next one, I'm going to go ahead and moving forward. I'm starting to see some people use kind of identifying kind of what they think, and you're on the right target. So great. The next one is the beneficiary. So who will be benefiting from this intervention? Type your answer in the chat. What's the purpose of the what? Who's benefiting at the end? Who is this for? Yep. All right. Okay, how about this one? Benefit categories. Is this resource related to fringe benefits associated to a salaried position? Type your answer, please. Correct. Good. Yeah, that benefit categories on the key, you're only going to need that when you're doing your fringe benefits PERS type such. So you won't need to worry about that, except for object code, we call it 200 benefits. And then how about the cost calculation? Okay, so what's the count or quantity of the position, service, or item, and the reasonable cost for the position, service, or item in this example? So the last part of this cost calculation is understanding what is the total amount needed. So what's the quantity? Let's first break it out. So what is the quantity that they're asking here? Yep, I see some people already putting out. Yep. So you got the quantity times the cost, right? So how much is the cost of each of those items? And then the total. So you might need to pull out your calculators or do a little math if you want to do that. That's going to auto calculate. I think Paige and Alyssa both had showed that, but go ahead and yep, I see some of you already got it. You guys are doing great. Okay, so next slide, please, Kim.
You got it.
All right, so you're all spot on. I think the hardest part was probably the purpose, the type and purpose, because it was kind of at the bottom, which was interesting. It was like a lot of fluff at the top, but you all got it. So here's an example, and this time it's color coded so you can kind of see, right? The school name is in green. You all got that right. And then the blue is the type and purpose. There's quite a bit, but at the end of the day, you know, it's basically those computers that they were looking for, those devices to help increase the ELA and math academic achievement. The beneficiary was students in grades K through 12. The benefit categories not applicable. There was no that orange we didn't have to worry about. And then the cost calculation, they're looking for 9 PC devices at $855.02. And if you total that, it'll be $7,695.18. Now there's an additional that they put in here. It says quantity and price may vary, and that kind of goes with sometimes you might, you know, depending on the types of, it might be a different price for certain things. Mm-hmm. So they just put, they may vary, but will not exceed the line item total, and no single item will be over $999. And that way that they can adjust, because lots of times you're kind of estimating, but maybe you haven't actually purchased, because you would do that later once you do your reimbursement request. So that's what they added here. All right, you guys all did good. Good job. Next slide, please, Kim. All righty. Now, what I would, from that last example, I don't know how everyone is in their SPP development, but that would be a great idea. If you've already started developing it, you could take one of your resources and try to test out that formula and see if you're able to translate it. That is the trickiest part, I think, of translating your resources from your SPP into the budget details. And that written component is definitely the part, the cost calculations and everything, and that written narrative part is the part that we tend to have to return because there's something that's missing. So just taking a look at that. All right. The next thing I would like to do is I am going to put in the chat some links to Canvas. So let me throw these in here, and you can feel free to follow along. As we've talked about through this training, I'm going to paste them right now. Here you go. Through this training, we have many resources actually within our Canvas repositories, and I'm actually going to take the ball and share a different slide here. All right, so this is an example of our SPCSA grants administration training, repository, Canvas repository. I put 2 in the chat, one for our SPCSA grants Canvas repository, and then the other one is also the continuous improvement process, which helps provide with evidence-based levels and these sort of things. You've got the plan for learning, SPP, links and such. So this is the school and support team kind of, they kind of lead this repository, but they're both very important and to this work. This is I'm going to focus because of time on our SPCSA grants administration. And I wanted to let you know that, the SPCSA, you might have already seen many repositories. I would highly suggest that you bookmark these sites so that you can access them at the moment in need. And today what I'm going to do is kind of focus on some key courses that's in our grants administrative repository for Canvas that you can focus on, because we have actually kind of developed them based on the full grant cycle. So some of them will come later, like you might need later, but for right now, we're just focusing on the application, the grants application process. All right, so you can see that here's an example. I'm actually in the student view here. So they have like these little expandos for the courses. So what I would suggest is if you're not familiar with Canvas, you might want to take a look at the welcome and instructions. And then the next one is its introduction to education grants management. We took a little sampling of that at the beginning of this presentation. We have both recorded asynchronous recorded modules as well as the PowerPoint presentations in here that you can take a look at. And so that's what we would encourage your staff to do, especially depending on your familiarity. I know that many of your schools are already familiar with federal grants from being in the Clark County School District prior, and so some of these may not necessarily be applicable to you, but you might want to take a look at that, or especially if you ever have new fiscal staff, this kind of gives a good foundation. Federal grants, you can see that they are broken out by all the different federal grants, Title I-A, and they have sub lessons of their purpose, goals, eligibility, methodology for each of these different grants that you can look at. Again, there's a recorded presentation as well as a PowerPoint presentation, and you can we also kind of try to put how long the recording is, so that can help you determine how much time you want to use to review that. I think a nice one that you might want to take a look at, that Paige and Alyssa both referred to earlier, is the Grants Management System GMS Basics. It starts from basic how to log in all the way to the different tabs, so the GMS different tabs. And this would be a nice one, to kind of review for the application, like if you want more information about the written components or the budget details that we just kind of reviewed later. Additionally, we have within these different modules, we have some key resources. So GMS is a pretty long one here, but at the end of the course, we tend to have these supplemental resources. So for example, if you recall earlier in the presentation, I had provided some links on the object code function code resource guide. So those are posted here. You got, and also NDEs, and there's others as well here. So these are nice resources that you can take a look at for that way, when you're ready to use the resource, they're always here. We have all these links in our weekly newsletters too. So if you forget to bookmark, or if you have new staff, they're always posted in both the Wednesday and the Thursday newsletters. So those are these first 3 modules are probably the most important that I would suggest. This welcome, the intro to grants management, federal grants, the GMS, and then this last one is communications. Now you can either access communications by hitting this link directly, or it's at the bottom of the portal, but this is just a faster way. So we'll see if it goes. Trying to redirect, hopefully it's a little slow. There we go. So communications at the bottom, and this is where we post our weekly grants unit important newsletters. So you'll be getting one actually coming out here right after this training, about 2:30, you'll send it. But we do post about a month's worth of communications here. We archive them after a month. So if you ever want to go back to communications that are related to our grant unit, you can take a look at these and see important information there. Just click the link and it'll pull up another page, and you can kind of see like this is the newsletter you'll get today, later on today. All right. I think that we're about ready to wrap up today's training now. I'm sure that you probably are all experiencing a little cognitive overload, a lot of information. I'm going to pass the ball back over to Kim, and she's going to kind of go over with some key housekeeping information and move on forward.
Thanks, Christina, and thanks everyone for your participation. You mentioned cognitive overload, and I think what I'm really grateful for is that we have the Canvas repository for you all to access and be able to have those live videos or just be able to read up on what we covered today. I want you to know we also have the team that's here to support you. So if there's anything that you need that was remotely foreign to you today, or just needing more information to fill in, please don't hesitate to reach out to us so that we can support you, and we're happy to work with you one-on-one as time allows. So a few housekeeping items, like Christina mentioned, she already made mention of the communication. So we have the SPCSA weekly grant unit newsletter that comes out on Thursdays. We also have the general SPCSA newsletter that is delivered on Wednesdays. So those are done back to back. So lots of good information in these newsletters. I know we don't always have time to read all the bits of information, but once you do that once or twice, you'll know where key information lives in these newsletters so that you can have those to refer back to. So familiarize yourself as much as possible in the beginning with those newsletters so that you can figure out how to use those as a resource for yourselves in the future. The other thing that we want to highlight for you is the FY26 federal application timeline. So you can see February 3rd, SPP opens for schools. Then we are moving into FY26 application cycle. So lots of notification about applications, when those applications are due. If you're not sure, don't hesitate to reach out to us like I've already mentioned. So that we can keep everything moving in a timely fashion for you and for us. SPCSA grant unit contacts. So I highlighted the team at the beginning in their headshots, but just a little bit more information for you regarding who does what in our grant unit. So Chris Myers is responsible for the grants that you see in green, the same for Alyssa as well as Paige. And do know that we are currently in the process of hiring for a new GPA too. So that position will be determined hopefully sooner rather than later, but it's a little bit of a process, as I'm sure you're all aware. So once we do that, some of the responsibilities, as you see on the slide, will shift, but we're excited to be able to build out this team and support you and your schools. And then the other piece that I wanted to give a shout out, I, again, introduced them through headshots and very quickly, but it's our school support team, which they're really about the program, right? So when you think about your SPP and aligning your grant application to your goals in that SPP, our school support team can really help you with those pieces. Would someone from the school support team just like to come off of mute, come on camera, and just highlight the different pieces and how your team is here to work with our schools, just as either a reminder or give them a little bit of nugget that they might not already know? Oh, I'll wait and let's see.
Sure. Marina, I don't know if you're here, if you want to
I think
go
Maria
through
had
this.
jumped, Brittany, so if you could do it, that would be awesome.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, Sarah Jorgensen and Jackie Working. They are going to be your contacts for SPED. Lydia Sedano, Dr. Lydia Sedano, she's going to be your contact for Title III EL. Myself, I'm your contact person for SPP, School Improvement. McKinney-Vento, Foster Care, Title II and Title IV on the program side. Connie Zeller is going to be your contact person for pre-K. And Connie, you can jump in and add on what else you do if I left something off. Erin Walker, she's going to be your contact for MTSS and Project Aware. And Marina Cutler is our director of school support, and you can contact her anything for all things school support.
Nice job, Brittany. Thank you for allowing me to put you on the spot and pull you out.
Anytime.
And highlight what the team does. That's really awesome. Thank you so much. Now it's time for our audience Q&A. So we wanted to give you a little bit of time. We know, like Christina mentioned, there was a lot of information delivered today. And so sometimes being able to have a moment to ask a few questions, you can either put those questions in the chat or come off mute, and we will have members of our team answer accordingly. Chris Myers, did you see anything in the chat question-wise that maybe some of the team missed and might be helpful for the broader audience?
There was one question from Robert, and he was saying that a lot of times they will have the same position, like you'll have 3 parapros, but each of those parapros will have a different salary. And we were kind of walking through how to write that, where your quantitative would be 1, and you would total those 3 salaries, and then you would distinguish that in the narrative. This parapro is making 25, this parapro is making 15, this parapro is making 30, and that's how you would clarify that in the narrative. And that was the only question at this point in the chat.
Nice. So just to even drill that down further, just to make sure I'm understanding. So you're saying that that's one budget detail item, which has to do with salaries, but in the narrative, you would describe those 3 different salaries being covered, correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. Okay, I'm learning too. It's great. I think there was a question from Jerry asking about putting the due dates up. Christina, where is this information available outside of this slide? Where have we provided this for folks?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Kim. That's actually in also uploaded into our communications portal. If you want to can take the ball really quick and show.
Go for it. That'd be awesome.
Yep, and you'll get another. I've been attaching it to all the newsletter, the emails as well, but it's also, I've been keeping it up at the top of the communications as well. So you can see, Jerry, that second link in the communications of our grants Canvas repository. That's, we're going to see the same sort of, it looks a little bit different of a format, but it's the same dates. You can see here, I'll pull it up really quick if it wants to go. There it goes.
Never goes as fast as you want it to in the moment.
Yeah. Anyway, so you can see that there.
Oh, great. Okay, perfect. That's wonderful. Any other questions that are coming up that we can answer for you in the moment while you have us here? How can we help? I'll use my teacher wait time, see what happens. The degree to which everyone is uncomfortable with silence.
And I know we have someone who, one of our colleagues is tracking attendance. So I'm going to put that link also again on the bottom of the chat here. So if you haven't already completed that form, if you would, please. Oh, yeah. Chris got me. Sorry, Chris, I didn't see it.
Yeah, she beat you to the punch.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, so we want to make sure we're tracking your attendance in terms of what you've been able to attend, how we can continue to support. It sounds like there's no other questions, so I will go ahead and simply wrap up our time together today and just say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all that you do for our students. Do know that we will have a follow-up to this session, which will include the recording as well as a PDF of the slides. Where we did an actual live demonstration, there will be slides so that you can walk yourselves through that information, so that if you don't want to watch the video, or if you wanted to share this information with a colleague, you can easily do that by using the screenshots that we embed into the resource for you. There will also be a follow-up survey. We really want to know the degree to which we're hitting the mark for you. How did this training go? On a scale of 1 to 5, getting some information in relation to the learning objectives that we put out. So do be on the lookout for that survey in the bundle of resources that we provide to you. And then in that survey, we're also going to want to know, what more do you need? How else can we support you as you're thinking through all that you have to do in this grant application season and being transferred over under the SPCSA purview. So if there isn't anything else that we can answer for you, again, thank you for your time, your energy, and your effort. I want to thank the team who worked really hard to put this together for you today. And we look forward to meeting your needs and supporting you, your schools, and your students in the coming year. So thanks again so much. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.